Everyone. I'm calling to order the Emeryville Planning Commission meeting of May 25th. The time is 6:30 on the dot. This meeting is being conducted in a hybrid in-person and Zoom format. Public comment is available for Zoom participants by using the raise hand feature or pressing *9 if calling in by phone. Charlie, could you please do the roll call?
Commissioner Dram?
Here.
Commissioner Gitzoni?
Here.
Commissioner Henme?
Here.
Commissioner Martinez?
Here.
Commissioner Wax?
Here.
We are expecting Vice Chair Simons and Chair Chafe.
Here.
So we have a quorum of 6 commissioners present.
Wonderful. We'll now move on to item 3, which is public comment. Now is the time for public comment on matters that are not on tonight's agenda. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Anyone who wishes to make comments related to items not on the agenda should raise their hand. If you're participating via Zoom, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if calling in by phone. Not seeing any attendees in the room right now. I'll move on to ask Charlie if there are any attendees on Zoom that have raised their hands to comment.
I do not see any.
And have you received any comments via online comment card?
No, I have not.
Great. Then I will close the public comment period. We can now move on to item number 4, which is approval of action minutes from April 27th, 2023. Do any commissioners have comments or corrections on the minutes? Okay, seeing none, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I make the motion.
In a second?
Second.
Great. Charlie, can you please call the roll?
Certainly. I'm sorry. Who was the second? Commissioner Wax? Oh, Commissioner. Sorry, couldn't see that. All right. On the motion to approve the minutes, Commissioner Dram?
Aye.
Commissioner Gitzoni?
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez?
Aye.
Commissioner Henme?
Aye.
Commissioner Wax?
Aye.
Vice Chair Simons is absent. Chair Chafe.
Aye.
6 ayes. The minutes are approved.
Great. We will now move on to item number 5, which is the Community Development Director's report. Charlie, go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Chair Chafe. So first, with regard to recent City Council actions, the Council has had 2 meetings since your last meeting. Those 2 Council meetings were on May 2nd and May 16th. On May 2nd, the Council held a study session to discuss the preliminary budget for the next 2 fiscal years. The Council approved a standard agreement for a grant of $671,429 from the California Arts Council Cultural District Program to be used for promotion, activities, and administrative costs associated with the Rotten City Emeryville Cultural Arts District. As the Commission may recall, 6 years ago, Emeryville was designated as one of only 14 cultural districts in the state with a small stipend of $5,000 to cover expenses. This grant of over $671,000 to be spent over the next 2 years is a huge increase and will enable us to really promote the Rotten City Emeryville Cultural Arts District in a meaningful way. On May 16th, the Council held a study session on the proposed capital improvement program for the next 5 fiscal years, which is the topic of your one and only agenda item tonight, so you will be hearing more detail about that shortly. The Council also held a second study session on the budget for a brief update for the next 2 fiscal years. The Mayor read a proclamation recognizing May as Affordable Housing Month in the City of Emeryville. And the Council amended the roster of the Parks and Recreation Committee to designate 1 seat for a planning commissioner or community member to allow them to appoint a community member if no planning commissioner volunteers to serve, as has recently been the case. And the Council adopted the recommendations of the Community Grant Subcommittee and selected Big Daddy's Community Garden, Friends of the Golden Gate Library, Head Over Heels Athletic Arts, Kala Art Institute, New Arts Foundation, Scientific Adventures for Girls, Stage Bridge, the Compound Gallery LLC, the Emeryville Historical Society, and We Perform as the recipients for this year's Emeryville Community Grant Program. And in other news, I'm happy to report that on Tuesday, May 9th, the building permit was issued for the Nellie Hannon Gateway Project at 3600 San Pablo Avenue. This long-anticipated project was first approved by was the first project approved by the city under SB 35, which mandates ministerial approval of affordable housing projects that meet certain criteria. It is being developed by Resources for Community Development, RCD, with about $16 million in funding from the city. and will provide 90 units of affordable housing, including units for formerly homeless. It will also include brand new space for the Emeryville Citizens Assistance Program, or ECAP, which has occupied the site for many years, and a groundbreaking ceremony is scheduled for June 29th. Another long-awaited building permit issued on May 16th was for the new plaza at Bay Street. The existing plaza in front of Barnes & Noble is being converted into a surface parking lot for the new grocery store, and a replacement plaza is being created along the extension of Bay Street south of Ohlone Way. As some of you will recall, this was an important consideration in the Planning Commission's approval of the new grocery store on February 24th of last year. And with this last major permit issued, the transformation of the southern portion of the Bay Street Center south of Ohlone Way should be completed within the next year. That includes the new grocery store and improvements to the food court upstairs and the new plaza. Finally, as the Commission may have heard, on April 5th, the governor announced that Emeryville was one of 11 new pro-housing communities in the state. In fact, we got a score of 59 points, which was the second highest in the state after the city of Sacramento and the highest in the Bay Area. Following that, we applied for a grant from the Pro-Housing Incentive Pilot Program, PIP, where the amount of money you get is partly determined by your score. And so we were well positioned for that. And we were informed on May 9th that we had been approved for an award of $575,000. This funding will be used to support rental housing development costs, including operating subsidies needed for affordable multifamily rental housing and capitalized reserves for services connected to the creation of new permanent supportive housing. Both the operating subsidies and the capitalized replacement reserve funds could be used in support of multifamily projects seeking funding from the Measure C affordable housing bonds. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Congratulations to all the staff on the pro-housing designation and all of the related awards. Very exciting. Any questions from other commissioners for Charlie? Okay. Seeing none, I will note that Commissioner Simons, Vice Chair Simons, is here and has joined us. And we can now move on to item number 6, which is disclosure of ex parte communications and conflicts of interest. Commissioners, if you have any ex parte communications or recusals related to tonight's agenda, now is the time to share them. We would not expect that there are any, but checking anyways. Okay. Seeing none, we can move on to item 7.1, the capital improvement program item. And
Chair
Josie is on Zoom. Yes, go ahead.
Before we do that, could I just announce, just for the benefit of the viewing public, that item 8.1 has been continued to the August meeting.
Thank you very much.
Won't be heard tonight.
Yeah, so item 8.1 is on the agenda but will not be heard tonight.
So we have Josie Ahrens from the Public Works Department, who will present the capital improvement program, and specifically this is for your determination of consistency with the general plan, which is required before the City Council can adopt the CIP. So take it away, Josie.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good evening, Commissioners. Nice to see you again virtually. Happy to be back to share more information about the capital improvement program. Let me get this in full screen, and then we'll dive in. So this is very similar in large parts to the presentation that I gave earlier this year. I'm going to breeze through that portion rather quickly so that we can get to the new information. In the report that was in your packet for this evening has a lot more information about how projects in each of the categories are compliant with the general plan. If you have questions about those specifics, I will be happy to answer them or pass them off to Charlie or other staff who are more knowledgeable about the general plan. But again, I'm here from Public Works to share about our citywide capital improvement program for the next 5 years. So again, I'll do a little overview, look at the timeline, share pieces about the foundation of the CIP. Then I'll get into the comparison, so looking at how the numbers stack up in this CIP in comparison to the last one. And then we'll leave time for questions and comments. So again, high-level overview, our CIP is a 5-year plan that guides Emeryville's investments in our public buildings, parks, streets, sewers, and other city facilities. And as city staff, we use the CIP as a high-level roadmap or plan to help us design, construct, and repair city facilities. And this is to help us get to our community-wide goals of having a livable and sustainable Emeryville. Projects that are in the CIP are large-scale, long-term investments that build, replace, or improve public infrastructure. As you can see the image here, and you may remember from last time sharing about the Greenway, which is a massive project that hits on all of those pieces: build, replace, and improve. And capital projects are different than our maintenance projects. Maintenance projects are small, short-term repairs, and those sorts of things can be requested through See-Click-Fix. The classic example is a pothole versus a fully repaved street. Pothole is going to be a maintenance project, a small quick fix, whereas repaving curb to curb is a larger capital project. Here's our timeline. I won't go through all of this, but we began last October with a study session at council, and now are all the way up until May of this year, where I'm presenting to you all right now at the Planning Commission, and led a study session recently with council. And then on June 6th, the CIP will be going to council for hopeful adoption alongside the city's 2-year budget. So getting into the foundation, I will share a little bit more just to remind you about the foundational pieces, these blue blocks down at the bottom. How we get from the foundation pieces to our draft list of projects was we began with the list from last time. So that was 85 projects, quite a long list. And we took input from city staff in the fall, council throughout this process, and then from the public early on this year via committees, getting public input at both city council committees and public advisory or community advisory committees, and then throughout February and March via an online public survey. And then how we refined from the draft project list up to the final project list is, again, asking council about their priorities, and then taking into consideration over the last 2 months a lot of our budget constraints and looking at what we have funding for and what we don't. And also where we might not have funding, where we could set aside sort of placeholders for future grant funding. So one of those foundational pieces is our source documents. The city has many plans and guiding documents, and the CIP is not looking to reinvent the wheel. We want to pull the priorities and projects from these different documents and sort of slide them into the CIP. So some of these documents are many years old. Some of them are still in draft form. The probably highest priority hot button plan that is in draft form that will hopefully soon be adopted is the active transportation plan. And public works staff are currently working on a tree implementation plan at the moment. But basically, like I said, we're pulling the highlights from these plans and putting them into the CIP. The other big foundational piece is values. And I remember when I came earlier this year, we had a discussion about the values. And at that time, we didn't have definitions, but I wanted to share with you today the definitions that we have for these values. This will be included in the CIP book that will be coming out, as well as the staff report that council will see for that June 6th meeting. So this is the first time that members of the public are able to see these values. So I wanted to give you a sneak peek. So for climate action, and I should say that the way that we're using values in the CIP is to tag different projects. So each project will have its own page in the book, and you'll see these different value icons highlighted if the project fits within one of these values. So for climate action, projects with this value will contribute to achieving Emeryville's goals in our Climate Action Plan 2.0. There are dozens and dozens of actions and goals within this plan. So it is quite a broad definition, but these are projects that are in alignment with that plan. Connectivity, this was added to the list of values by a former council member. And we're defining this as projects with this value will increase multimodal access to community spaces or create places where people can connect. I remember we had a discussion about the equity value, and the way that we're defining this is these are projects that will prioritize investments that benefit historically and currently marginalized Emeryville residents, including people of color, low-income families, rent-burdened households, and zero-vehicle households. The application of this value will depend on the project type. So what I mean by that is we went back and forth about how we were going to define equity. I think last time I talked about doing it geographically, so looking at by census tracts in Emeryville that are low resource or low opportunity areas. As I was looking at that geographic definition and our projects, seeing that there are many projects that would benefit people of color, low income folks, or zero vehicle households that are outside of those geographic areas. For instance, building bike infrastructure or transit infrastructure so that low income folks can get to restaurant service jobs. We wanted to make sure that those projects that increase that access could be given the equity value, even if they are outside of that geographic area. And so it's a little bit based on the project type. I hope that makes sense, but happy to answer more questions about it. The maintenance one is pretty straightforward, but wanted to be clear in our definition that these are projects that will extend the useful life of city facilities and infrastructure and subsequently improve our return on our investment. Maintenance is often neglected in capital investments. There's sort of a lot of hurrah and celebration when the ribbon is cut, but not a lot of focus on making sure that we have funding set aside to maintain the project after it's opened. And so these are projects that are going to be having a specific eye on maintenance. Quality of life, these are projects that will enrich the daily lives of constituents who use city facilities and infrastructure through joy and excitement. And this value also supports opportunities that further art and innovation in Emeryville. And then the last one, these projects will further general public safety, including but not limited to personal safety, traffic crashes, fires, and other climate or natural disasters. Last foundational piece are our new categories. So we have these 6 categories here. These floating numbers around them are the number of projects that are in each of these categories. Our housing category is a unique beast. It's one of its own kind. And basically the way that we will be showing housing in the CIP is giving a nod and reference to the affordable housing expenditure plan. So there is a page in the book for housing, but it is saying that our public investment in housing is through this expenditure plan. And the subsidy that the city is giving either to physical buildings or through programs, that is the real investment that we're bringing. And that's why we just wanted to reference the plan. We didn't need to reinvent the wheel on that one. All right, so this is some new information. This will be published in the report and in the book that will be going to council. This is a comparison. The first table is a summary by CIP category from the last CIP from 2019. That CIP had 11 categories, 85 projects, and was $54 million in total, not including the housing. And I pulled the housing number out of that because in the new CIP, we have 6 categories, but 5 that have projects. So that is removing the housing. And we now have 46 projects totaling about $68 million, which is a 26% increase. And the reduction in projects is because we've completed a large number of projects that were in the CIP last time that now have been phased out because they've been completed. And a number of projects have been combined into buckets. So for instance, we had 3 different projects that dealt with bridge maintenance across the city. Now we have 1 bridge maintenance project that is pulling funding from those prior 3 projects. And so happy to answer more questions about that. But this is just a high level comparison between the last CIP and this one. And I believe that's it for my presentation. So happy to answer questions and then also to hear your comments and feedback. And hopefully we can move forward with the commission finding the plan is compliant with our general plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josie. That was really helpful. I'll ask if any commissioners have clarifying questions for Josie right now. Commissioner Hamney, go ahead.
Yes, would you mind putting back the budget page?
No problem. This one?
Yes, thank you. So the one that jumps out is the sustainable transportation, where 3 years are $1.5 million roughly, and 1 year is 11 million, and 1 year is 28 million. I wondered if you could explain that one.
Sure. Let me pull it up so I can be accurate in what I'm sharing. Some of this fluctuates because we have grants that are coming in specific years. Let me find this. Okay, so the big jump is in that later year because we are have a currently unfunded project called the Loop, which is coming directly out of the active transportation plan, which is to increase safety for all users, you know, people biking, walking, and taking transit, and people driving in the Shell Mound Christie sort of loop area that also crosses Powell. We have sort of set that aside in that later year as a 12 million placeholder. That is the current estimated cost of the project. So that is why at that later year it jumps quite high. We also anticipate another project on Shell Mound that would basically close the gap between the loop and where the 40th Street project would end. And that's almost $6 million set aside also in that year. And so, you know, as we get further out, sometimes the projects get a little more murky because we maybe don't have the funding yet, and we're sort of putting future placeholders there. So that's why there's that large jump in that year. We are working currently to apply for grants and with developers for their bonus points to hopefully be able to fill that unfunded piece in those years. But quickly looking at my notes, those are the 2 projects that have that higher price tag on it.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Martinez, go ahead.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One was about the values on which that were some of these, the lens for these projects is based. Where do the values live? Are those in the general plan?
These are values that came out of discussions with city staff in the fall and also with the council. And so some of these values are in different plans that we have. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say that they directly come from the general plan. The prior CIP did label projects with general plan elements. As a newish staff person, and then also to the benefit of members of the public, we wanted to used values that felt a little more legible and accessible than labeling things with general plan elements. And so that's why we pivoted and used this framing.
That's great. I actually find this very helpful. I find it simple to understand, clear and easy. And under the safety value, we seem to be getting very close to the values of Vision Zero, which is zero traffic fatalities. And I'm just wondering if there's been any conversation about that in any of our committees or among council. Certainly, a lot of the actions that we've taken and just the items that are included in our CIP reflect a move in that direction. But I'm wondering if anyone's talked about making that official.
I have not been part of any conversations to make it official. I think one of the ways that Vision Zero has been able to spread so much is that you can adopt a lot of the principles without actually calling your work Vision Zero. And so you're right that a lot of our transportation and public space investments do focus on reducing traffic fatalities and serious injuries. But I, to this date, have not been part of that.
Well, I'm certainly proud to be part of the movement to do all of the actions to get us in that direction. And then my final question is, could you pull up that budget page again that shows the consolidation of the different categories? I'm just curious, where did vehicles go into sustainable transportation? Because I know we're electrifying part of our fleets. So is that where vehicles lives now?
Vehicles are actually moved into essential infrastructure.
Okay.
That category also has our quiet zone project and our storm drains and our bridges, sort of those, essential pieces. We did kind of go back and forth on the vehicles, but we landed there as it is, a piece of the way that the city is able to do our work.
Okay, so sustainable transportation, I'm guessing 40th Street and San Pablo are included in that. What else is under sustainable transportation?
Yeah, so it also includes our parking and transportation demand management, our street lights and traffic signals. It also includes funding set aside to have active transportation plan studies. And then it has the largest project in terms of its scope, not necessarily the price, but the scope is now our Sustainable Streets project, which is the new iteration of our paving program. But because our paving does so many complete streets aspects where we do green infrastructure and other updates as we pave, sidewalk upgrades, that sort of thing, we've combined all those pieces into a new project called Sustainable Streetscapes. And that will be our paving sort of 2.0 or paving plus project and program.
Great. And for the viewing public and for my colleagues, if if it wasn't clear before, whenever we repave streets, we update all of our bike lanes and improve all of that infrastructure that helps people get around, not in cars. So I think the way that our city does it is really well thought out, and that this is even an improvement. So thank you, Josie.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Go ahead, Vice Chair Simons.
Thank you so much. I had just a very brief question. So I was trying to find the full list of projects to sort of look at within these categories. Is that not available yet, or did I just look in the wrong place? Or I should have texted Charlie. Where can we find that?
I believe that it was in the packet for the study session earlier in May for council. I will say that the packet will be posted tomorrow for the June 6th council meeting, and that will have the full final draft of the booklet and all of the project lists. In your packet, I also believe that in Exhibit A or Appendix A for this report, there is a list of projects by category.
Thank you.
It's attached to the resolution, and it's also included within the staff report.
Other questions? No? Go ahead. Yeah.
Josie or Charlie, could someone share with us what the council comments were at their May 16th study session? Because they received a similar presentation, right? Just wondering how they felt about this direction.
Josie, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I can start, and then if you want to add in, I was
Okay.
also there online, so I might have missed some of the nuance of the comments. I think they didn't have too many comments. Councilmember Pryforce mentioned equity a lot, and how we are tagging projects around equity. And Councilmember Carr shared about trees. I know that is also having a more robust tree program is a priority of Councilmember Bowders as well. But overall, they didn't have too many comments. They've seen the presentation, I think, 3 or 4 times at this point, and more mostly antsy to see the final book. I did include in that study session the book pages for all of the new projects. And so out of the 46 projects, about 18 are new. Some of those new projects are what I mentioned earlier, the combo project. So the bridge maintenance one is considered new, even though it combines older projects. Yeah, Charlie, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, that sounds like a pretty thorough summary of what I recall at the council study session.
Great. Well, I have one question that's kind of related. I was curious, coming out of the surveys that were done of residents and others who interact with Emeryville, and then also the committee meetings, would you say that the priorities were pretty well aligned between different groups and different ways of getting input, or did you notice any diversity or anything that were kind of clashing?
Yeah, great question. The staff report and final booklet gives a more in-depth review of the input that we received. I'll say the input that we received during committee meetings and community advisory meetings was quite light, but we did receive 122 responses on our online survey, which is about 1% of Emeryville's population. And the majority of people who filled out the survey live in Emeryville. We also had a breakdown for people that work in Emeryville or travel through Emeryville or visit Emeryville. The biggest themes that came out from the public input was wanting to advance and prioritize active transportation projects. Another high priority item were parks, and so investing in park spaces and wanting to explore possibility for new spaces or how we can be creative with the space we currently have. And then the other item that rose to the top was a lot of input wanting to move along the Art Center project and voicing a lot of support to make sure that project can sort of begin again or be able to cross the finish line soon. Yeah, those were sort of the main 3 things that rose to the top. There were 2 projects that were in the survey that received almost no votes as a number 1 or 2 ranking. Those projects were a redesign at the Powell-Hollis intersection, and one other one. Let me see if I can find it. The other project was, a facility inventory study. So this was a study or proposed study to look at the different public facilities we have and the needs that we have across the city, and trying to understand if some needs could be moved to other facilities. Those 2 projects received almost no first or second votes, and so we have not moved forward with putting them in the CIP. The third project that received very few first or second votes in the ranking was the parking and transportation demand management project. That project is in the CIP again, but is in with 0 funding at the moment. And so those are sort of the ways that we were responding to the input we received through the public survey.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. And then just one last question on parks. So I think I was just trying to look at the report that we have today. And what I couldn't tell is there money available for expanding park space, or is it mostly about park improvements, or is that not determined right now?
Sort of to be determined. I'd say most of the funding is set aside currently for maintenance and improvements, replacement, that sort of thing. The park studies category is a bucket of funding set aside to study the location of future parks. As you all probably know very well, Emeryville is quite constrained in our space, and we don't have a lot of available space for sort of future parks. But with that being said, we're trying to figure out how we can be creative in doing parklets or pocket parks, or transforming some street space potentially into park space. And so that's definitely a piece of the park funding, but also a majority of the intention is to going to repairing and upgrading our current park facilities.
Great, thank you. Just check one more time. Any more questions? Nope. Okay. Thank you so much, Josie. So at this point, it is time for public comment on this item. I will open the public comment period. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Anyone who wishes to make comments related to this item should raise their hand. If you are participating via Zoom, please use the raise hand function or press *9 if calling in by phone. Seeing no attendees in the room, Charlie, are there any attendees on Zoom that have raised their hands to comment?
No, there are not.
Okay, and any online comment cards?
I have not received any online comment cards for this item.
Great, then we will close public comment now. And now it's time for our commission feedback and comments. Is there anyone who would like to go first? Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you. I think this is well thought out. There are several. I just want to put in a pitch as someone who's been following our infrastructure for some time, that if and when there's a couple of things that I would, as a planning commissioner, I hope I get invited if they actually get installed in the near future. The large trash separator is something we've been talking about for years. And if and when that ever gets installed, I would like to see it in action. And it was a few public works directors ago when we started talking about this, and I just put in a word with every single one for while they're here. That's something that I really want to see. But I am happy with everything in the staff report and staff's answers to all of our questions, and I would be happy to move the resolution when the time comes.
Great, thank you very much. I'll just go in order. So Commissioner Hemney, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I agree that the report was well done, and I also agree with Commissioner Martinez that the value statement, I think, is particularly a well-stated and really good to include, because it obviously tells the public and readers of this report what is important to the various powers that be that have prepared this report. So yes, I commend you on the structure and analysis that's been done, and I also support the plan.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Dram, go ahead.
Thank you so much for the report. I think it's very well thought and put together. And the only thing I want to add, if we can consider some public arts ongoing, even a small budget, would be have a good effect in a long term in future years. Other than that, everything looks good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Vice Chair Simon.
Thank you. Thank you. Since we're talking about the value statement, I'll just weigh in on one value. A big part of equity for me is making sure our city is set up for people who do not live in Emeryville yet, but might like to in the future or would like to right now. So it would be nice if we could include them, or at least think about them. And other than that, I'm excited to see more details on some of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gazzoni, go ahead.
Besides thanking you for the presentation, Josie, and noting I really think that the inclusion of values is helpful. It gives a context to a lot of the details that you've got going on in the budget. I don't really have any comments. It looks good to me, but I don't have anything that stands out in terms of what I would suggest or comment on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Commissioner Wax, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to also thank you for the presentation. And I really like, as I think I'm echoing everyone here when I say I like the values as they're laid out. I think that they reflect the values as I think I understand them of the city, and the buckets make sense as well. I just want to add one little comment on one of the values, which is under safety. You have personal safety under here, and one of the things that I'm often thinking about is there are a lot of times, and we're an active transportation first city, where a person is making a decision whether or not to drive, if they have that option, or to walk or take their bicycle. But let's just simplify it. Making the decision between driving and walking based on what it's like outside. For a lot of people, that's a comfort issue. We, of course, want people to want to choose the active transportation option as often as possible. But one of the most common things that's going to, send people into their little air-conditioned fortress is the heat. That's just a quality of life issue for a lot of people, and it's also an issue that has a major effect on the way commerce takes place, especially, when we're really trying to drive walking-based commerce in our community. But for a lot of people, it's a safety issue. It's literally about, is it safe for me to go outside today? Is there, sufficient shelter, rest, and respite from the heat for me to be mobile? And let's say that they don't have that option of being able to get into a car, then it's a pretty major issue for them whether or not we have designed our city for a future in which the hazardous levels of heat on our street are extremely common, especially for our older population. And just a very quick anecdote before I stop talking so much. This last summer, I happened to be in very quick succession in Union Square and in Belltown, Seattle, while each one was having respectively their hottest heat waves of the year. And the difference was amazing. Union Square was basically barren and there's no shade, and it was awful. In Seattle, there was shade everywhere, and Belltown was full. And if you got out of the shade, you were immediately like, oh, right, it's incredibly hot out here. But you mostly weren't ever out of the shade. And we don't have enough of that here, or honestly throughout the Bay Area. So it's a drum I'm going to keep beating, especially because, again, it's not just a quality of life. It's not just about commerce. It is also about safety for a lot of the individuals in our community to have access to our sidewalks. So it's a pretty broad-reaching issue, and while we're talking about values, I just wanted to bring that up. So again, thank you very much for all of the hard work. I think this is an excellent-looking plan. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great anecdote. And I'll follow that and say that I echo a lot of what's already been said. I think the values are really useful, and I can imagine that they were not easy to come up with and to articulate. So congratulations on that. I'm particularly happy to see the climate action plan pulled out and mentioned specifically for implementation, because oftentimes there's a gap between creating a plan and then actually implementing the plan. And so being able to track that through this funding cycle is really important. On the parks, I appreciate your answer about using creativity to eke out every little bit of potential park space that we can get within our small city. And so I do hope that the funds will be flexible enough to look at potential places, even if it's just a pocket park here or there. I actually think it goes along with Commissioner Wax's point that if you can create green oases within our city and a place for people to stop and enjoy a spot, even if it's not large, I think that's a real value. Especially as we try to increase active transportation and connectivity within the city as well. And then going back to the values, my last comment is that it's great to see equity in there and articulated. And I think now that, I'm sure you already have plans for this, but just to emphasize that in implementing this and aligning with the general plan, I think we can use the equity definitions as indicators of prioritization for the projects, and then also to track success. So what's happening after we spend this money? How is it aligning with that value, our set of values that's embodied within the definition of equity for Emeryville? So with that, I will just check if there are any other comments. Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you. I apologize. I didn't contain these in my first comments, but you all just gave me so much more to think about. One thing is, Josie, you had mentioned that the parking management did not get a lot of traction in the public surveys, but I just wanted to reflect to you that the Commission on Aging actually took an action last year where they wrote a letter to council as a committee and said that it was important for them. So I hope at some point that does get funded, because it does tie into our active transportation plan and encouraging people to, when they're making that choice, whether to get into their car or to take another form or another modality to get around town. I do think ultimately that is very important. And I'm glad that Zoe, Chair, that you highlighted that the climate action plan is spelled out. It's a really good climate action plan, and we as a city, we've done 2 of them, and we had a really great help with staff when we completed that. And there are so many things that we could be doing that are called out in that plan. Just from my day job, I know that the Inflation Reduction Act has a lot of funds that the federal and state governments have not yet conceived of how to spend this money. And there are a lot of, I know there's some nonprofit experience up here at the dais as well, but there's people are still trying to connect the dots with this pot of money that our government thankfully put together before the economy started getting a little wonky. But the fact that we have this climate action plan means that we could be candidates for drawing down some of these funds and applying it to some of the things that make our community more resilient in the future and sustainable. So if no one else would like to make a comment, I would like to make a motion to move the resolution.
Great, thank you. Would anyone like to second?
I will second it.
All right, Charlie, when you are ready, please go ahead and call the roll.
All right, on the motion by Commissioner Martinez and seconded by Vice Chair Simons. Commissioner Dram?
Aye.
Commissioner Gitzoni?
Aye.
Commissioner Henme?
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez?
Aye.
Commissioner Wax?
Aye.
Vice Chair Simons?
Aye.
Chair Chafe?
Aye.
7 ayes. The resolution is approved, and we will forward this to the City Council along with their consideration of adoption of the plan. I believe it's June 6th. Is that right, Josie? So at their next
Yes.
council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josie. Okay, great. So that is the end of our items for today. We'll move on to number 8, which is Planning Commissioner comments. Would anyone like to make a comment at this time? No comments. Okay, then we move on to 9, which is adjournment. Hopefully I got the numbers right. Nope, I know what I did wrong.
10
It was
is
9 was Planning Commissioner comments
We
and 10 is
we
adjournment.
skipped item 8 tonight.
It threw me off.
That's
All
why.
right. Great. So we're adjourned at 7:18 p.m.
All right, thank you.